So, welcome. They're still, figuring out logistics back here, but we can go ahead and get some of the stuff done so that you can get as much of this as possible, right? So, this is the workshop, so you're in the right place. Congregational Rapid Response Team. And so I'm now reading from my script. Good afternoon, and welcome to the 7th Annual Pathways to Hope Conference. Again, being welcome. My name is Ann Homke, and I'm the Faith Liaison with the City of San Antonio. And so I'm also part of the Pathways Planning Team and have been with it since the beginning of time. And so it's been really great to watch it change and grow. I really believe that this is like the best conference in San Antonio. And it's not just because it's at no cost, but I do think that that makes a difference, right? So the people who come really want to know what's happening here, right? There's none of this whatever else, right? And it really has changed who we are as a city. And so Doug and I could sit down and tell you about how things have morphed and grown, and it really has changed us. So it's had an impact on a very personal level, but also in a very public way. So thank you for being here, being a part of this. I'm going to be your moderator today. There's an exit only there. And the screen is over here. But is anybody in the room here for CEUs? Well, that just made my introduction a lot simpler. So, no, I don't need you to be. I don't need you to be. And it's my very first workshop that I moderated. I don't know. I guess I don't introduce a lot of people from like bios. And I'm excited because I don't know the folks who are leading this. And the last two, I knew the people I was introducing. I've known them for a long time. But I read their bios and I was like, I didn't know this, right? Like I've known you for 10 years. I didn't know this. And so I'm thinking we should all just hand out bios when we get together. Like, oh really? Because I read the first line in this. And these folks are a part of the Rafa cohort. Which is part of which is part of Bridges to Care San Antonio, which was birthed out of Pathways to Hope, and it was birthed out of a lot of stuff at Pathways, but we now have working sessions on Saturdays at the very end. It's kind of like, okay, we've heard all this good stuff, what are we going to do with it, right? And the first time we did that, that's when Bridges to Care started to take root. We had another year yet that it kind of like had to germinate, but the next year at Pathways to Hope, at the end of August, we birthed Bridges to Care October 1st. I mean, that's how fast we traveled. It took us a month, right? That's exciting. So it's so good to meet some folks in Bridges to Care. I haven't met everybody yet. So I get to introduce Dr. Andy. He's an educator, pastor, clinical pastoral counselor, lead therapist with Rafa cohort. Dr. Andy is a graduate of Texas A&M University Corpus Christi, earned his PhD from Royal Priesthood Academy. Where is that? San Antonio. What? Now see, I just learned two things.
Me and Keely are two alum.
Oh, yeah, okay, I know now, got it. Dr. Andy has advanced certifications in crisis and abuse therapy and integrated marriage and family therapy through the National Association of Christian Counselors. Dr. Andy was a Texas licensed paramedic for 20 plus years. And as a result, is sensitive to the plight of first responders. Isn't it the truth? I think about the fire persons who opened up the trailer with the ice. Yeah, how do you get by that, right? Ever. Right. And as a result, is sensitive to the plight of first responders and has worked with first responders in crisis since 2013. Thank you. Dr. Andy is a Bridges to Care wellness champion and mental health coach. Dr. Andy is a member of the National Association of Christian Counselors and the American Association of Christian Counselors. Typo. Dr. Andy and his wife Jennifer have 3 children and live in San Antonio. And his mother, Dr. Jaynie, is a minister, clinical pastoral counselor, and a therapist with Rafa cohort. Dr. Jaynie earned her PhD from Royal Priesthood Academy. Dr. Jaynie has advanced certifications in crisis and abuse therapy and integrated marriage and family through the National Association of Christian Counselors. She's a certified grief and loss facilitator. She is the founder of the San Antonio Ark of Safety. I want to know about that. She's been a member of Kingdom Life Christian Ministries for 18 years, where she serves under Apostle Tyrone and Pastor Tonya McCurry. Dr. Jaynie is also a member of the National Association of Christian Counselors and the American Association of Christian. Another same title. How that happened, I don't know. Dr. Jaynie and her husband Marshall have a daughter, 3 sons, and 10 grandchildren, babies, who live in Converse, Texas. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I said, if you need anything, let me know. And she said, well, I don't know. He won't need anything, no. And I'm like, no, Mom, your mother can say that. You know, like, yeah. So it's a mom that's not only supportive, but she knows that she has a strong son. So that's wonderful. Thanks for being with us. I'm going to take a quick bathroom break, but I'll be back because I don't get many opportunities for that. So I will be back.
All right, so I'm sorry for all the delay. Seems that I was told to go to one room, and I'm supposed to be here, so I apologize for the delay. So I am Dr. Andy, and so Mom and I are going to be doing this presentation about the Congregational Rapid Response Team. Let me tell you a little bit about where this comes from and what we're wanting to do. The idea for the Congregational Rapid Response Team very quickly came from right after the Uvalde happened. I was listening to what happened in Uvalde, and you heard Reverend Am help you say that I was a paramedic for 20 plus years, right about 24 and a half. And so and being a pastor too, I thought about all of these churches in Uvalde and all the congregations that they were affected by. I mean, all the different people that come in that are in those congregations, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is not a big place like San Antonio. What happens if you've got 100, 150, 50 people coming to some of these smaller churches? If you're a pastor, what do you do? There's only one of you. How do you meet the needs of all of these hurting people? Because, by the way, as a pastor, that's the job duty, right? The job duty is to meet the needs. As a clergy person, as a person of faith in a worship center, in a faith center, that's the job. That's the description, is that you're there to help people that are hurting, is at least one of them. And I thought, oh my gosh, how would they do this? And so I made a comment to Pastor Ron Blue, and I was talking with her, and I said, it'd be cool if we had something to be able to help these pastors. She's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we can put people that are trained in crisis response and that are members of a church and say, hey, we're going to come on scene and we want to help you. Here I am, send me, right? We want to go and say, how can we help you and be a part and integrate as part of your ministry even temporarily, or if your faith center even temporarily, to try to help you meet the needs that you've got for an extended period of time if necessary. And so Pastor V said, well, what are you thinking about? I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm just thinking about this. And so I talked with Donna. Donna said, hey, can you put something together? 10 days later or something, I was given the first presentation of what I thought was going to be the program. So I want to share it with you today. Mom's going to be helping me. You notice we'll be tag teaming a little bit. We won't be jumping off the top buckle or anything like that, but we will do a little bit of moving back and forth. All right, so I'm going to tag and let her do the objectives real fast, so come on.
The participant will be able to define crisis in their own words, describe and differentiate essentials of crisis response, lead and be able to provide emotional and spiritual support in crisis, function as a team member in a rapid response team. Do I go down, up,
Hit that
across?
to the side.
Okay. Crisis work is not counseling. And the difference between the two is crisis work frequency is usually 1 or 2 meetings. And you focus on the present, what's happened in the present, and you have goals to be supportive and the homeostasis. With counseling, with the frequency, and you do 1 or 2 for a week and an extended portion of time, or extended duration of time, and you focus past the present. And the goals for a counselor is how past experiences can impact how we respond to the events and the present.
And so this is one of the things that I wanted to make sure really clear first off is that just, those of us that are trained clinicians, it doesn't mean that you're going to make a good crisis interventionist. Because what we're trying to do is we're talking about ABCs and bandaging and splinting, right? When we're doing this is what if you're kind of to be kind of medical with it. We're talking about the things that are right now, right necessary. And we want to try to get them into the cognitive domain as quickly as possible and not so much into the affective where they're worried, we're thinking about all emotions and stuff. If we can get them into the cognitive, then we can dill a little bit and help them get through what all is going on. So the homeostasis means that it's an even keel. Homeostasis is a kind of a normal balance. Homeos meaning balance or normal or balance and stasis states. We want to get to a normal state. Whatever state that they were in before, we want to try to get them to that one as quickly as we can or very near it, right? We know that we're not going to get them to exactly that same place because that ship has departed often in the case of a crisis. So what we're trying to make sure that we do is get them back to as much as normal as we thought that they were before.
Okay, the Community Rapid Response Team Level 1 training.
That's what this is.
Mhm. The purpose of the CRRT is a faith-based response to support congregations that have been impacted by tragedy or natural disasters. The objectives are training, utilize wellness champions, mental health coaches, other therapists, and pastoral counselors. Planning, you plan now for a response in your community, and you network with congregations and or places of worship.
I think this is important because just after school started, there was a report in the news about some guy around Windcrest, Windcrest area, one of the schools in Northeast, waving a gun and acting silly outside just right after school started. And the cops were able to de-escalate that and get that guy in custody, but we don't know how that could have continued on. So it's not a matter, unfortunately, of if it's going to happen in your community. I think in our community it's just a matter of when.
Okay, the topics. The role of an individual member, stages of crisis response, how to respond to crisis, and creating your CRRT in your own congregation.
So there's this quote here by a Greek poet that I think is interesting. And this quote here basically is something I was taught as a medic, and I'm sure that those of you that are in the military, they kind of reference this in some form or fashion. And basically it says we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. And truthfully, you fall to the most comfortable level of your training. You don't fall to the highest level of your training. You're going to fall back to the level of training that you're most comfortable with. It's about how that goes. And so what we're trying to do is, through the training, is to train you to get to a place where you can function at a high enough level where we can meet the needs of somebody that's in a crisis, that has been a victim of a critical incident. And so the first thing I'd say is that there's this old Greek phrase that used to be inside of the Hippocratic Oath, the primum non nocere, and that means first do no harm, right? So first thing that we do as a crisis interventionist is we want to make sure that we're not doing any harm. Our goal there is to help, right, and not to hurt. So as we function through and as we move through, that needs to be one of the paramount things in our mind, is that we are there to make this person better. And at least for the short term, try to get them from where they're at to where they need to be next. And that means that we may have to let them borrow our frontal lobe, and that's okay too. So we're going to support the community and the communities of faith to which we're called. So we've been invited to a place where somebody else's faith community. And this is important for me to make sure that everyone understands. The intention of us creating this program is for it not to be just a Christian thing, right? So I'm a pastor, I'm definitely come from that background. But it doesn't have to be just a Christian thing. This could function equally well within a synagogue or a mosque or any other place. So it's important for me to make sure that that's really understood. And it doesn't really matter when we're talking about on the ground in a critical incident. The time to proselytize is not then. When a critical incident's ongoing and you've got something like happened in Uvalde or something similar, the time to proselytize is not that moment. You may have that opportunity later, but right now we need to be worrying about the individual as a person and start worrying about, again, the ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation. Are they bleeding anywhere in a sense, right, psychological sense? And what can we do to splint anything that's broken so that they can begin a recovery process and get them to somebody to help them? And then we want to utilize the gifts and training. Each and every one of us brings to bear a unique set of circumstances and gifts that we all have accumulated over a lifetime. And it's those individual characteristics and gifts that will make us strong and make us great critical incident interventionists. So crisis interventionists, that's what it's going to make us. Is all these the stew of things in our life are really going to help us get to where we should be. So there's 5 stages of crisis that I want to make sure that we talk about. So everybody has, the first one is normal stress, and this would be called eustress. Eustress is just kind of your normal thing. I mean, everybody has stresses, but but not always stressing us out, right? I mean, just a normal thing. You know, did I feed the dog? Did I lock the house? Did all those kind of things. But then if something happens, we can quickly go from normal stress to an elevated level of stress. And this elevated level of stress is get a little bit of anxiety with it. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen with me? What's going to happen with this? And it kind of a doubt, and it can cause us to be really, really anxious. Then severe stress and anxiety. Now this is where something is, we're thinking about, oh, could this be bad? Now it is bad. And now we really think it's bad, and it's really messy. It's really causing a problem with how we see the world. How we see the world and the world that we have been in. And now when a crisis happens, the two are like those big Hulk hands, you know, if you're a fan of Marvel stuff. I'm a little short-handed, so forgive me, but they smash together, right? And they kind of grind. And so that idea then, what happens when two things collide, what falls out, is what we're talking about. So this is really what we're looking at. And then the crisis itself is something that we're going to define and give you a good definition of. And then we're talking about the resolution of the crisis. Now the resolution of the crisis can be sometime in the later on, 2 to 4 weeks. But I would say to you that if you're watching the news, I would say that some of these folks, for example, in Uvalde, they're still in crisis, right? There's still things going on there. All right. So what do you think? What do you guys think? A real quick survey. What do you think the most common reaction to crisis is?
Shut down.
Shut down. That's a good one.
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Anger. Yeah, that's good too. I like it. Any other takers?
Withdrawal. You want to run away?
Denial's a good one. Sir?
You want to run away from it?
You want to right? Yeah. Yeah. Those are all good. I think the most common reaction to it is going to be, I'll go back. I think the most common reaction to it is going to be, you're going to do the next one, is going to be shock. Oh my gosh, this can't happen. No. Then it gets to denial. The first thing is, what? Really? And then denial. Because it challenges our worldview, right? We assume, we make certain assumptions or presuppositions about the world that we live in. And when a crisis happens now, our presuppositions about the world are challenged by what we see in our experience. And so people that go through a critical incident and in a crisis, they're going to have this where they can't believe it's going to happen first, and then they're going to go, no, it didn't happen. And that's the body getting us ready to really handle some things that we may not really want to do, because I don't know about you, but not many of us have signed up for a crisis on an ongoing basis. As a medic, that was something that I expected, right? You know, someone called 911, I knew that we were going to go to their house in what might be the worst moment of their entire life. That's what I signed up for. That's what I trained for. But apart from that, you know, the shock and the denial gets it so that as an individual that your body can prepare you to handle the stressors, to kind of kickstart the process for you to survive and make it through.
And can we all say that when we're in a situation like that, your life is forever changed? It's not the same as it was before this incident happened. So you have to find a way to navigate yourself around what in grief we talk about finding your new normal. Okay, I have a question for you.
25%.
25%.
All of them.
All of them.
What time of the going on?
Yeah.
What time of the everybody?
Now, ma'am, if you had asked me that when I worked on an ambulance, I would have said, yeah, probably. What do you think? 25% I heard, that's a good number. 1 in 5, that sounds like a great number. Okay, so let's see. 19.86. So, listen, I'm kind of a numbers person, so I didn't want to round that up, because when I said 20%, I didn't want you to think, well, it's not exactly 20%. It's close enough for government work, right? Who said 1 in 5? That's on the mark. 1 in 5 people. So looking around this room, 1 in 5 of us has a diagnosable or diagnosed mental health condition. Right? So how does this apply to what we're doing in a crisis? I want you to think about this. From a crisis standpoint, you get, if someone's already struggling with mental illness, and now you get to this major tipping point where their entire world has been rocked, and everything that they think that they know is now not the same. And now what do they do with the world that was 5 minutes ago and the world that they're in right now? You're already working in a person that could decompensate pretty quickly. Could, not that they would, right? So in a sense, it's almost like a comorbidity, and you've got something that may make someone move from point A to point B or to point C or D very quickly. So as we are working in an area, as we're working in a congregation or a faith-based community, we would do well to know that 1 in 5 people is already going to have a diagnosable mental illness or diagnosed mental illness. And so that may affect how they see what happened to them, how they internalize it, and how they react to it. Because the critical event does not define the crisis, and we're going to get to that.
I just couldn't get over the 50 million. Think about that number. 50 million Americans suffer from mental illness. Okay, let's talk about active shooters. I was amazed when Andy and I started getting all this together. Look at 2016. There was 20. And then it went up a little bit in 2017, and I would like to know, I'm a no person too, and we didn't define this too well, but I wonder if that had something to do with the shooting in up in Massachusetts or wherever it was. And then it just kind of leveled off at that as if that's not bad enough, right? And then in 2020, look, it goes up to 40%. I can't, go ahead.
But what is it we want to do?
Yeah.
Sometimes those statistics aren't available to us, you know, right away.
What was it in 21?
2020. He asked what it was in 2022.
It takes a year or two for the FBI to compile those statistics and publish them. And that's where I pulled the information from, was from the FBI.
Yeah, you're not 21 either.
Yeah, those are not finished yet and not published.
Okay.
They're like the CDC, sir. They kind of drag their feet with getting out the information to us, especially when you're talking about vital statistics and things like that. They got to check them real good.
There are 160 active shooter incidents, 2000 to 2013. 164 casualties
In 2020
alone. Just 2020 alone. I'll tell you, I was at Uvalde. I've been to Uvalde. I took Andy's youngest son, and I wanted him to be able to see, to be there to be able to see the reality of it, not what he's seeing on TV or he's hearing from his friends or whatever. And it was very moving for both of us.
I have a question. What about Sandy Hook? Why didn't
That's what I was trying to think of earlier.
Happen? Why is it taking 10 years or however long it's been to really start recognizing this stuff? You know?
Ma'am, I would say to you, I don't know. That's one of the great questions. I think after Uvalde, everybody's asking. What's the story, right? What happened? But what Mom and I want to do is that we want to make it so that through this, and the second lesson that you can take later, is that you can get your church, create this kind of team, and create a group and go, here I am, send me. I want to go, and we will sign up to go and help those that are hurting. That's what we want to be able to do. And so those are the answers that we can help to provide. Some of those things, as you're asking, like the why questions, and I don't know if there's any answers to why questions ever, really. So really talking about principles of crisis response, we're talking about something I call pie, and not the good kind of pie, you know, like lemon meringue or key lime, which is one of my favorites. This is a different kind of pie. So we're talking about proximity, immediacy, and expectancy. And really this talks about how we can treat people near a critical incident. This stuff goes all the way back to World War I, and I've seen actually reportings of talking about going back to as far as Napoleon, but really in World War I they started trying to work this out. Proximity really then is going to be defined like this. Proximity is how close to the impacted event the team is located. The proximity location to the impact is important. What they found out is that the closer that you can work with someone to a disaster area or from the time or where it happened, the better off they are in the long run. Now for us, we're talking about a CRT team, talking about our response team that's going to be going to a congregation or a faith-based community. We're not going to want to go to the hot zone, right, where the event happened. In fact, you're not going to want to. They're not going to let you get there, and you really don't want to show up there and saying, "Hey, by the way, I'm with XY Congregational Response Team. We want to help. We need to get you connected to VOAD, the Volunteer Organizations Assisting in Disasters, so that you're on the list of things like that to go and do." But we want to be able to, in the area we are, to work with them. The fact that we're in the community as near as we are, whatever church it is, that's going to have to be proximity enough for us. But what they found anyway in World War I was the closer they treated the person to the front, the better off the person recovered. So when we're talking about proximity here, we're talking about at the congregational, wherever the congregation is, wherever the faith community you're at, getting them right then and there. Because after all, they came to you first. That's going to be a big difference between proximity and at the scene of the hot zone and not. And considering the proximity of the team's impact, the goal is not long-term counseling, but the ability for the person to come back to a normal functioning. This is important. I'll say something about proximity. I was very near Sutherland Springs. After Sutherland Springs happened, I was in that area for 2 days. And I worked with first responders, medics, firemen, cops that would come. And I've got stories, if you're ever interested, of people just showing up and just sitting on the back of a truck and just crying. And what's going on? And trying to, hey, are you okay? What's happening? And that was near, and we were near enough that it was fresh for them to talk to us, but not so near that they had their armor on. Does that make sense? And so that's what we did. Immediacy is quick, how fast we're going to get to them. Immediacy is important. Immediacy is how rapid the response to the event is in question. So how quick can we get there? Listen, again, we're not getting onto the hot zone. We're not getting onto the place where it's really happening. There's other people trained with that. You probably need ICS training, the Instant Command System. But what we want to do is how quickly can we deploy, can we get to the faith community that's asked for us to get there. The goal of immediate response is to arrive quickly and assist in mitigating the effects of the stress and returning the person to normal functioning. That's that word, normal functioning. Whatever normal is. Now, I don't know what normal looks like. I'm not normal. All right, I can't count to 10 without taking off my shoes. So normal is a loaded word. What is normal? Normal is a range, right? And when I was doing my medical stuff, normal blood gases are on a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. But you could be on the low side of normal, you could be on the high side of normal, but normal may be what's normal to you. As a medic, I would see dead people on a routine basis and go, that's terrible. It just might be a bad hour or two. But that was the job, right? But someone else sees them that's not used to seeing that. That's a whole different thing. Now that's not just a bad day. That's a bad week or a bad month. And so the idea here of normal is, what does normal look like? I don't know. But that individual that we're working with, they know what their normal was. And so we're working with them to try to get them back to whatever their normal was. Everybody, that making sense, everybody? I don't want to sound like I'm ivory tower here. Simply stated, the goal of expectancy is normal functioning. What do we expect? We expect to be able to mitigate the psychological stress and be able to get them to return to whatever functioning it was before, or as close to it as we can get to. To be able to allow them to vent and work with them and apply some principles and get them back to normal functioning so that the frontal lobe is functioning and not so much the amygdala.
Dr. Ann, I had a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Since this is crises, are you trying to not get them back really totally to normalcy, but to the place where somebody can walk them through the rest of the journey to normalcy?
We want to get them back, that's a good question, we want to get them back to functioning as normal as we can. We may not be able to get them, you're not going to get them back to what the normal was before because it no longer exists. But if we can get them and we can reach them and we can give them a chance to talk, we can work with them a little bit, and there's a lot to be said for cathartic ventilation. And so if we can get there and get them to do that, and deal with the immediate needs, then we can make it easier for them to re-enter what was normal, even on their own, or if we need to send them to someone else to kind of refer, if I'm understanding your question,
Right.
that would be, and not everybody we're gonna need to refer. And we'll talk about, what you're looking for when you assess someone in a crisis. Who needs to go on to a therapist? Who needs to go on to a psychologist? What does that look like? What should we be looking for?
But initially, you're trying to stabilize them
Stabilize.
before they can even go to someone else.
Stabilize, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think all of us here are old enough to know the old MASH show, right? Right, it's kind of a MASH thing, it's kind of that immediate thing. We want to stabilize, we want to get them right then to where we've equipped them, worked with them enough that they can go on, that they're stable enough to go on, or that we go, okay, look, you know what, we need to send you to someone else to make sure and continue this.
And see, I think of it from my way I think about it is, it's like when there's something wrong with you and you call the ambulance. Well, the ambulance comes and the medics on the ambulance, their job is to stabilize you as best as they can in order to get you to the hospital where the specialists take over from there. So we're like that. That make it.
Yeah. Good
Not
questions.
everybody's gonna need a hospitalization.
Right.
That's right. That's right. And I think the goal really from in my experience has been, if you take someone that's in a crisis and you work with them and you apply some principles and they know that you're listening to them and you give them a chance to talk and you meet the immediate needs that they have and make sure that they have kind of Maslow's hierarchy of the low things, right? That most of the time the body's going to take care of its own thing and the mind's going to go on and it's going to figure it out. Kate, do you have somebody that can call? Somebody that can be with you, or are you by yourself? Well, yeah, I don't know. Okay, well, do you have the number? And those things like that make a big difference, right? It's just the idea of not being alone. Yeah, not everybody's going to need to have referral. And in fact, not too often have I seen us have to refer people. Even when I worked with paramedics and firefighters, it was very rarely that I had to refer someone out. So what we want to do is we want to use the Ministry of Presence, prayer, mental health, first aid, psychological first aid, grief and loss work to really get to a person and support the congregation to which we are invited. One of the things I want to say here about this really quickly is that I think that this is important. When someone comes to us, and if you're in a congregation or a faith-based community, and someone comes to you and they want to talk to you about what's happened in a critical incident, we need to understand that it's like walking on the surface of the moon. It's walking on this. You're walking in a place where nobody has ever walked before. Someone has invited you into their own private pain. It's this very sacred ground that you now have been invited to enter into. So as we walk and as we step, we want to be careful because it's literally like, I think about, Robert Frost, no step, that the road less traveled on says no step that has been trodden black. We're talking about a path that no one's ever laid their feet on. And you're putting your feet there for the first time, and we have the opportunity to really meet someone at their need and help them and strengthen them and make them better as much as you possibly can. Okay, so because we got started so late, I don't think I'm going to have a whole lot of time to do this, but I do want to ask you. Read this one and tell me, just kind of think about it for a second. And I just want to give everybody a chance to say, or give a shout for a second to say, hey, how do you think that you would handle this? This is a tough one. Some of these scenarios come out of my own experience, and this is one of them. I wasn't at a faith community, but I was somewhere else, and a person came up to me and it was affected by a tragedy, and they were like, so, did she go to heaven? How do you think you answer that?
I don't know.
What does he think? That's what's important.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll tell you how I handled this. He came to me and he said that, and I said, wow, sir, hi. I introduced myself. I said, hey, sit right here, let me talk with you for a second. Gave him a glass, gave him a cold water, and said, so now tell me about this again. It seems what you're telling me is really distressing to you. He's like, yeah, so this happened, and now I'm wondering what happened to my daughter. And I was like, okay, well, are you okay at this moment? Are you all right? See, really, this question gets to a theological question that I don't really want to get into. It's a why question, right? And to me, the why question isn't all that important at this moment. He's hurting. So I said, hey, sit here a second. Tell me about your daughter. How long ago did this happen? Tell me about the circumstance. And after about 30, 45 minutes, he was better. I never had to answer the question. I did dodge the question, but there's no answer to that question, right?
Yeah, you don't.
I don't, it's not what I want to do. It's not my purpose. My purpose at that time was to try to help him decompress and heal, not to answer the deep theological questions. There's maybe a time for that later, but what I wanted him to say, what I wanted him to know was, hey man, sir, I'm here for you. I'm listening. Tell me about what's important to you. Let me give you some water. Do you have some family? What happened? Were you affected? He's like, yeah, this is what happened to me. I was like, do you have a family member that we can call? And he said, well, it's in my phone. And I said, well, have you called him? I just don't know how to do it. I was like, okay, well, unlock your phone, hand me your phone, and tell me who it is. And if it's all right with you, I'll help you walk through it. And we did that. And the person came and met him and got him, and everything was better. I never heard anything else from him. These are the questions you're going to get as a crisis interventionist. Things that you got to be ready to how to handle. You can do reflective listening. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But on the why questions, there's no real answer to. But we're there to support. We're there to love. We're there to upgird. We're there to strengthen. And that's what I tried to do. So what's a critical incident? You've heard me use this term a little bit. I'm gonna get a little bit wordy and nerdy for a second. And so if you don't like wordy and nerdy, just hit the pause button. This will be a commercial break. When we're talking about a critical incident, it's a spark, it's a catalyst. It's something that's happened that facilitates a reaction in one way, form, or another. It is really something that causes or that can facilitate psychological trauma, or emotional trauma. The word catalyst I like. So my undergrads originally are biology and chemistry, so I love those things. I'm a science nerd. I love it. And a catalyst in biology is something, or in chemistry, is something that allows a reaction to occur much faster. So the amount of energy needed for something to occur diminishes, and so it goes really quick. And we need things that are catalysts to make reactions go fast in our body. But what we need to be aware of is sometimes a critical incident, like the guy before that is wondering about his daughter, now that turned his world in upheaval because he may have thought about it a little bit but then able to go on, and now what happened is the trauma of what happened at the critical incident for him was too much, and it brought it back, and he thought he had it settled. And so a catalyst is something like that. It's something that can cause a reaction to happen faster, can cause someone to progress through a kind of a psychological or emotional trauma. And I got to say that sometimes these events can be very traumatic. When I was during the Sutherland Springs thing, I heard things from medics that were horrible. That they were unseen and walking around there and treating people that I never even thought of. And so thinking about some of those were okay, but then they were remembering something that happened to them years ago that they thought they had dealt with that they hadn't, and now it felt like it snowballed. Does that make it? It's like if you have a little bit of snow at the top of a hill and you let it roll down, by the time it gets down, it's this massive thing, right? Nobody can stop it, and I think that's kind of the way that it was described to me. So, what is crisis? I'm going to tag team here, Mom, because I think I've been talking long enough.
Okay. I was just going to let you go. What is a crisis? Your role as a crisis response member, understanding crisis, emotional and spiritual care, the ministry of presence, grief, and loss. So, what is a crisis? Is it how a person reacts to a critical incident? Remember, it's not about the incident. It's about the person's reaction to the incident, right?
So real quick about this one. A lot of years, right, on the streets as a medic. It'd be rare that you're going to find something that I haven't seen. Not that it couldn't happen, but a lot of the things, it would take a lot for it to be a critical incident to me. Right? What may affect someone else may not affect me that way. And this happens, it doesn't matter what it is. Some of us grow up in environments where we are used to a certain thing, to certain circumstances, and maybe that doesn't affect us. It's not about the incident. It's about how it affects a person. You can find people that that have gone through something bad, like a tornado or a hurricane, and they're like, yeah, we've done this before, and they just go on about the bit. It's not a critical incident to them. It's not to say it's not a stressor, but it's not a critical incident.
And I can testify to that because I'm a native Oklahoman. So tornadoes, I'll take a tornado any day over the hurricanes here in Texas, completely. Okay, so what is a crisis? A temporary event affects the ability of an individual to maintain balance in his or her environment. Require a trigger, can be internal or external. So I really like the one that says affects the ability of an individual to maintain balance in his or her environment, because those things can really knock you off balance, right?
Everybody remember teeter-totters? Right. Our life is somewhere on a teeter-totter. And from day to day, sometimes we have to stand up a little bit on our tippy toes to keep a balance. Sometimes we can sit down to maintain a balance. But whenever we have a crisis, whenever we have a critical incident, and it becomes a crisis now, we're trying to actively shift up and down on that teeter-totter to try to find that balance. And sometimes things get way out of whack.
Right. And it goes back to requiring a trigger like we talked about on some of the other ones. A temporary event. It strains the resources and abilities of a person and or community. Some crises are of short duration but can severely intensify, or intensity, I'm sorry. Balance. Like all levels, there is a range within normal. Crisis can shift a person out of what is their normal state of balance, to a temporary state of imbalance.
Okay, so my mom's here, so I got to be careful with this next slide. All right, so back in the day, PDA didn't mean a personal data assistant. It meant something else, public display of affection. Not that I ever got in trouble for that. I heard that you could get in trouble for that. Yeah. So I'm like, mom's here, gotta make sure everything's on the level. It was okay. All right, but PDA. So what we want, one of the things that I was thinking about when we created this was, our role as a crisis response member is to give someone PDA. We want to give them patience. We want to promote healing. We want to diminish psychological distress. And we want to assist the community in finding a new normal. So to me, PDA was about affection, right? Not about the data assistant like, back we had all these things to write our notes on. That's not it. What I'm thinking about is how we love someone, how we treat someone that is in a crisis. And so I'm a big proponent of making sure that people know that they're loved. If someone knows that they're loved and they're not alone, that does a big thing for someone in a time of crisis. Simple stuff, right? But we just want to promote healing, diminish psychological distress, and assist the community in finding this new normal.
And can I say something too? When people are in this, they want to be heard. I mean, if you just sit there and let them talk, and then know that you're interested in them and that you're willing to help, they just want to be heard.
So, I am a wellness champion, right? I went through the wellness champion training with Bridges to Care. And so, we learned mental health first aid. Now, as you go through this, if you've had any training from the ICISF, the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, I've got tons of training from the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. And so I really, you're going to find a lot of similarities because those are things I was trained in. But I decided that I wanted to use mental health first aid. So, what really is mental health first aid here? You've got it up before you. It's trying to help a person experiencing a mental health challenge, mental health disorder, or mental health crisis. It's given until the appropriate professional level of help is received or the crisis resolved. So we help them until we are sure that they don't need to go on to another person, right? We don't need to do a warm handoff to a psychologist or a therapist, or we do have to give them off to a psychologist or a therapist. So I wanted to put this up here so that we see this is the algae process that we're all taught during the mental health first aid, going through the wellness champion training. They call it algae. ICISF has one that's pretty similar. They call it PCAID, but algae is the one that we learn through our wellness coach training. It's A is the assess for risk or harm, risk for suicide or harm. This is important. Now we need to distinguish really quickly here. I'm checking my time. We need to distinguish between someone who after an incident, their world is just an upheaval, right? And they're like, oh, I wish I was dead. That needs to be distinguished from someone who says, I'm just going to go kill myself, and they're really serious about it. Okay, really? So you'd like to kill yourself, is that right? Yeah. Have you thought about how you would do it? Well, yeah. I thought about how I would do it. Well, do you have access to that? That's a whole different thing, right? There's a difference between the person that says, I'd like to die, and has got a plan to do it, and really thought it through, and someone that's just going, this is so terrible, I wish I could just bury my head in a pillow and go to sleep and pretend it never happened. So what we got to do is ask these questions when we talk about assess for risk for suicide or self-harm. Hey, so you want to kill yourself? Man, that's awful. So tell me, have you really thought about it, or is it just, this has really happened and it's terrible and you don't know what to do? Oh no, I'm thinking I'm going to go home and do this. Okay, at that point, now you need to get someone, you've got to get that person to emergency mental health. You've got to get that person to see someone. 911 at that point is going to be your friend, right? To get them to talk to somebody, because you can't leave that person alone from that point on. If they've thought about suicide, they've just, yeah, I'd like to die, this is how I do it, and I have access to it, that unholy trinity there is what I call that. At that point, you've got to get them to someone that can really help them. So listen non-judgmentally. You notice if someone says to me, in this case, I didn't say, you want to kill yourself? Well, that's stupid. That's not it. You want to kill yourself? Well, that's terrible. Wow. Tell me. And so you can listen. It doesn't mean that you're not listening with an agenda. You're letting them talk. So I call this, and this is called a lot of other things too, but I call it a cathartic ventilation, and I'll describe that. A catharsis is a cleansing, right? And ventilation means that you're just getting the air out. And so sometimes what you have to do is you have to get the air of your thoughts out. And I think about it like this. When I worked as a medic, I had to go through some fire training. And the guys on a house fire, they would go and they would send a firefighter up to the roof, and they might cut a hole in the roof. The idea to cut a hole in the roof is to let the smoke out so that the smoke level will go up so the guys can go on and do their thing. And so this is the idea. Sometimes we have things that go on in our life that make the smoke level of our thoughts just drop low and low and low until where it's suffocating us. It's pressing us against the floor. And so in terms of listening non-judgmentally, I think that's what we're doing here. We're not listening to say you're wrong, that's silly, just let it go. At this point, I'm not even trying to correct, I'm not correcting nothing. Really? Tell me more. I don't understand that. Could you be more specific? Can you help me understand this? And just let them talk and let them run through. That sometimes that's all people need is to be heard and know that you care and that you're listening. Give reassurance and information. So this is important to us. Let them know that you would expect that this would be normal. I think this is a big thing, and one of the things that we learn when you go through CISM training, and is that they tell you the crisis, critical incident stress management training, is that they'll tell you we've got to be normalizing the responses of people to critical incidents. Hey, I really feel anxious, or I'm really stressed, or I really don't know what to think, and it feels like my mind is just fogged up. That's okay. That's expected. In fact, that's pretty normal. What you're having is a normal response to something that's absolutely abnormal. And knowing then that it's a normal response makes me feel like there's nothing wrong with me. Right? And so now, if I know that there's a normal response, then I'm not having the extra stress of, I must be a weirdo. There's got to be something, I must be broken. And encourage self-help and other support systems. That's something that we want to be able to do too, is to be able to encourage self-help. Make sure that we talk about, hey, really when you go home, don't drink, don't smoke unless you do those things all the time, and then maybe that's another discussion. And then, what do you, go to the gym. I always tell people when we do CISM training, I tell them, hey, look, when you're stressed out like that, those hormones, the stress hormones, cortisol, comes out one of 3 ways. You sweat it out, you cry it out, or you pee it out. Drink lots of water, no shame in crying, and the gym ain't going to hurt you at all. Okay? And then encourage appropriate professional help. If they need help, you need to get them there. If you're in doubt, make a phone call and try to get them into somebody that can help them. This is one that I'll hit really quickly because I know that when we're talking about different types and different faith groups. Most of faith groups have some form of prayer. So, prayer is not a bad thing for someone that you can do. It doesn't mean that you have to be praying with them right then. If that's fine and that's what they ask for and that's what you can do, then that's okay too. But there's nothing wrong to be saying a silent prayer and, asking for that person to help, for that person to come out of the situation that they're in. I'm going to go through this pretty quick too because I want to get to the ministry of presence. I am not trying to make a neurobiologist of you. I love anatomy. Again, kind of wordy and nerdy. I want to talk about the hormones that are really quick that are going to be responsible for us in terms of crisis. So epinephrine is the one that gives everybody the kick, right? Something bad happens, and you get that kick of epinephrine, and now your heart rate's faster, you breathe a little faster, you get a little excited, and for those of us that have been in situations that are really stressful, you might feel a little buzz, right? And if you're in it a lot, you might feel a little shaky. And so that's from epinephrine. That one we call adrenaline. That's what that is. That's adrenaline. And then norepi is another one that's there too. Your frontal lobe and your amygdala. Your frontal lobe is where the seat of your executive judgment is. Right here, right behind this bone, aptly called the frontal bone because it's right in front of the frontal lobe. Go figure. They did a really good job of naming that one. Made it easy for us. And the frontal lobe is where our rational thoughts and all those things occur at. It's where our personality exists. Now, the problem is, sometimes in a critical incident and in crisis, it gets so bad that our frontal lobe can't talk. It's talking, but it gets drowned out by the screaming baby in a room. You've ever been in a room with a baby crying and drowned out a bunch of adults? And that's kind of like the amygdala. The amygdala is a place in our brain about this far inside the middle of our brain. And what it does is the amygdala has to do with our emotions. And what it has 2 branches on each side, look like almonds. Anyway, what I want you to know about them is I'm old enough to remember black and white television, right? In fact, I think my first TV, little bitty TV, was a black and white. So your hippocampus, which is where your brain stores all your memories, that's black and white TV. Oh, Leave It to Beaver stuff, right? I guess Leave It to Beaver eventually was colorized, right? Anyway, black and white, yeah? But your amygdala sees things in color. So, another example. I can remember if I smell yeast bread, like rolls or bread like that, I can walk in, I can smell that, and I can close my eyes if I have to, but I can see my grandma's kitchen and remember the color of the carpet and the layout and everything. Now, that's because I'm a guy and I like food, right? But I can remember it without those things, but man, let me smell some yeast rolls or something like that, and now everything's in vivid living color. This is how sometimes people get in trouble with PTSD and things, is that because our memories our hippocampus is storing memories, but really what happens is our amygdala makes it in color because it associates it with emotion. And that's kind of, it colorizes it, and that comes from the emotion. Hopefully that makes sense and it's not too wordy and nerdy. So the cognitive function is the effect it has on our brain and how it works. Sometimes people in crisis really need your frontal lobe. Hey, do you have kids? You're here with me. It's time for kids to get out of school. Do you have children? Who's getting your kids? Oh, think about it. Okay, is there someone we can call to help you? Is there someone that we can send to help you do all this? Or how can we help you? Let them use your frontal lobe and see how it happens. All right. So I'm talking about ministry of presence. And the ministry of presence, this is an ICISF thing. So if you don't like the term ministry, I want to make sure that you understand this is from the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation and part of the training I went through. And I like the ministry of presence. It really is something that's important to us. And whenever you're talking with someone that's there, you can pull up a chair and you can really talk to them, and all you got to do is sit. Hey, what's going on? Or just sit beside them. Is it all right if I sit here with you? You don't even have to touch them. Just, can I sit here with you for a second? And then eventually you may get the opportunity to talk to them. Appropriate touch is okay. So, environmental safety, you don't want to do this in some place that got lots of things going on. Typically, we're talking about being in a church or other faith-based community, so it'd be all right. Listen, ask questions, nod your head. Hey, can you tell me more about that? That's interesting. How does that work here? So that they know that you're actually involved in a conversation and you're not just counting down the seconds till they're done. This lets someone know they're not alone, and in human beings, that's a lot to us. Practice non-judgmental attitude and acceptance. Again, this is not a time to correct theology. It's not a time to quibble about little things. Just let someone talk. Unless they're talking about harming themselves or others. Let them talk. So the other thing that I can talk about here is, Mom and I talked about this, CPR. Sometimes people don't like the term ministry of presence, so we thought that the CPR might be a good way to kind of explain the same thing. We're talking about just compassion, presence, and reassurance. Have compassion on someone. I want to say this, we're getting low on time, but I want to say this. When you're talking about being a crisis responder, you're going into the darkness. You're going into the darkness and maybe the darkest time of a person's entire life. And you're going there and you cannot be afraid to go to the darkness. It doesn't mean you have to be the darkness. It doesn't mean the darkness is going to take you. But you've got to be willing to go into the darkness because you can't meet someone and help someone and try to make them better if you're afraid of the situation they're in. So when we talk about going someplace and working as a crisis interventionist, if you've got some kind of problem that seems similar or had a situation very similar to what you're going into, you haven't resolved, that's something you need to fix before you go. Because your job is to go into the darkness, grab somebody else, walk with them, and bring them back out of the darkness into the light. And that sometimes it's just as simple as letting them know, hey, I'm here for you. Talk to me a little bit. Walk this way. Come on a little bit this way. Come on a little bit this way. Come on a little bit this way. And you can get that frontal lobe going. And now when the frontal lobe starts going, it'll diminish the cries of the amygdala. And now they can start thinking for themselves and thinking logically. And when the brain turns on, it's hard to cry and think at the same time. You can't really do both. Crying and wailing and thinking don't happen at the same time. Or at least that's not my experience. So compassion, presence, and reassurance. You're there and that you're with them, and you're going to be with them till you can get them some help or hand them off to somebody else. This is active listening, and amazingly, we're about done here. So as we're talking about active listening, this is one of my favorite things in the world. I love active listening. It's something that you learn as a therapist or even as a pastor. It's something that can be good for you to learn. And even as a good friend, to be a good friend to someone. Be attentive. Don't listen to respond. Sometimes we listen to people and we're thinking about what we're going to say next. It's not about what you say necessarily. If you say something wrong, it can be. But it's about you letting them know that they're not alone and you're here for them and you're going to walk this process with them and you're going to help them get better. To me, that's what we're talking about. And this is something that I think that we're uniquely equipped for, that faith communities are uniquely equipped for of any kind. And so we want to listen non-judgmentally. Again, don't correct anything. Don't worry about it if something's wrong at that point in time. It's not. It doesn't matter. Ask open-ended questions. Don't ask yes or no questions, right? You don't want to ask those. You want to ask them questions that make them think. Why? Because if they're thinking, it makes it hard to cry. If they're thinking, they can move out of the realm of the affective where all their emotions are and now move in a place where they're actually thinking and processing. And now once you've got them in the processing mode and you've got them in a cognitive mode, now you try to keep them in that cognitive mode until now you can build upon that and they're not likely to go back to it so quickly. Display appropriate nonverbals. Now, listen, as I'm spending time on the ambulance, and I pastor at Church Under the Bridge where the homeless are at. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I see lots of hand signals, right? And not all of them are good. I see lots of nonverbals. And, but we want to practice good nonverbals, right? We want to, yeah, tell me more, yes. The crossed arms, nonverbals, crossed arms, crossed legs, that's not listening, that shows you're not listening to someone, you're closed off. You're separating yourself from it. The idea of closing your arms around your body like that, by the way, psychologically, it's to protect the vulnerable portions like your liver, where all your blood is at. You ever think about that? When you cross your arms, you're protecting the vital bits under your rib cage, where your liver's at, because it bleeds a lot. It's where all your blood is, 20% of your blood or something like that, at some point in time in your liver, or maybe in your liver at any point. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is we're not sitting there, crossing our arms, crossing our legs. We want to lean in, listen to them, nod your head, make sure they know that you're with them. And then summarize. So what you're telling me is this. And that makes a big deal. Sometimes people say, well, you know, I da-da-da-da, and we go, well, so what you're really telling me is this. I go, well, it sounds kind of stupid when you say it like that. I'm just saying what you said. I guess that's not right. Well, let's talk about it for a second. Why do you feel this way? See, I didn't ask yes or no questions. I responded, let them know I'm listening to them, summarize what they said. They go, well, no, it kind of sounds kind of stupid. Well, I'm just asking, you know, is this? Okay, well, tell me more about it. So now I get them involved, and I can get them to talk and move them into that frontal lobe and get it moving out. All right, this is the last one. So this has been the kind of the introduction to how to have be a CRRT member, how to have a rapid response team in your own congregation. So this is my contact info up here, my email address, my phone number. And so if you want some more information or to be able to take the second level of this class, feel free to reach out and email me, and I'll be happy to help. I'm under time, I think. It's supposed to go to, so I've got 4:15. Wow, did it? That's fast. So, any questions? I'm happy to answer questions. Mom and I both.
So why did this just get added to this? Is this something brand new that, you know, because I didn't know anything about this, and I was like, wow, this is exactly.
Well, thank you. It was originally, I think they had some kind of hiccup with the website, because I was there one week, and then my wife got on. She's like, she was going to try to see if it was going to be streamed or something, and she's like, babe, you're not on. It's like, no, I just talked to Donna, and Jenna, it'll be okay. She's, no, you're not. And so when I talked to Donna, she goes, oh yeah, there was a problem. And they got it added, but I think that was probably after the print. So, but I did the first class of this in June, right before Bridges of Care took the break in July. And but I've done one of them, and so it is kind of new. I mean, it happened right after Uvalde, and it took me about 10 days to make the lesson, get it approved, and then I did the first training of it, this class. So it's the second time that I've done this class.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for letting me drone on, and hope that you learned something today, and be happy to answer any questions or anything else that you need. Thank you very much.
And thank you both for being here and doing this. It's so timely. This is the end of the conference for today, just so you know that. It made me think, though, a couple of things, so I really appreciated it. One, I don't know if you know, but every federal department has a faith liaison. Did you know that? Yeah. Department of Education, Department of War, whatever it is, whatever it is, they have a faith liaison. I asked the one, though, in Health and Human Services, who I met at a Pathways to Hope like 4 or 5 years ago, came here, because I do a lot of research, and you talked about both of these things, because his work is to look across the country, right? And so I asked him, I said, well, what kind of things are you finding efforts have the most impact? And he said, oh, well, that's easy. I was like, oh, well, I'm all in. If it's easy, I want to know what it is. And he said two things, and you talked about both of them. things that are in near geographical proximity. So Bridges to Care, for example, was based on that, to put cohorts of congregations and other efforts that are in near geographical proximity to the need. So working together where you need it. The other one was the closer to the ground, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the closer to the ground that the effort is in the human need, the more impact it has. And everything else will start to take care of itself. So a lot of those bigger things that are really important, but start, so your whole thing about, are you okay? It's school time to pick up your kids, you know, that bottom, like right there. So I appreciated that. It also made me go out and get some stuff if you want it. But 2 days after Uvalde, one of our community collaboratives formed. And in fact, Bridges to Care came out of a community collaborative like 5 years ago, community working together, and we formed those. Anyway, one formed here 2 days after Uvalde, and it's called the Sane Society Community Collaborative, only the E is in parentheses. So it's actually SAN Society, that holy, sacred. Can we get smarter? We're smarter. We really are smarter than this. And can we work together as San Antonians to heal, to prepare and prevent and intervene when there are these moments? Can we be better prepared? And so there is a collaborative that put together, there's a handout here you can take with you, and there's more copies out there. But if you'd like to be a part of the collaborative, looking at the entire community of San Antonio, you'd be more than welcome to do that. And my name and stuff is in the back. But there's also a handout they found on talking to children about violence. So tips for families and educators. So again, there's big stacks of these out there, but I brought some for you.
And let me plug Bridges to Care real quick too. I think
Yeah.
that going through the training with Bridges to Care has been something that's been really helpful, particularly within our community. And so what I'd say to you is that the training that you can do through the Bridges to Care is going to be a great first step. I mean, it's kind of the best pre-crisis that you're going to find. And so if you're interested in being able to do work like this, let's just do the pre-crisis stuff first so that you're trained and equipped and ready to go, so that classes like this and the one that follows make more sense. So get into Bridges to Care, do the wellness coach stuff. I mean, I got a PhD, I did it anyway. I love it, it's great. Get with it and take those next steps. It's a great pre-crisis, and it's something that I would really encourage you to do.
And the side benefit, the major benefit, is it creates community.
Absolutely. That's important.
It's the whole point. Right? So thank you all for coming. I hope you are coming tomorrow. I think it begins again, 9 o'clock, doors open, 9:30. Thank you.
Thank you.